The bay gelding collapsed in the middle of Main Street just as the afternoon sun turned everything in Las Animas, Colorado, into shimmering waves of heat, and Willa Rose knew, without looking twice, that someone had ridden this animal near to death. She dropped the basket of linens she had been carrying back to the boarding house and ran toward the fallen horse, ignoring the small crowd already gathering around the animal and the man who knelt beside it. The cowboy's hat had fallen off, revealing dark hair plastered to his skull with sweat, and even from several feet away she could see his hands shaking as he stroked the horse's neck. "Please," the man was saying, his voice cracked and desperate. "Please, someone help him." Willa pushed through the onlookers and dropped to her knees on the other side of the horse. The gelding's breathing came in terrible, rattling gasps, foam flecking its muzzle, and its eyes rolled white with exhaustion and pain. She pressed her hand against the animal's neck, feeling the racing, irregular pulse beneath the coat that was dark with sweat. "How far did you ride him?" she asked, her voice sharp. The cowboy looked up at her, and she saw his eyes were a startling blue even in his dust-covered face. "From Sterling," he said. "I had to. My brother, he's sick, real sick, and I needed to get to him before." Sterling was nearly 200 miles away. Willa's jaw tightened, but she saw the genuine anguish in the man's face and knew this had not been cruelty, just desperation. "We need to get him out of the sun," she said, standing. "Can some of you men help move him to the livery stable?" "That horse is done for," said Mr. Peterson, the banker, shaking his head. "Better to just shoot it and be done with it." "No." The cowboy scrambled to his feet, swaying slightly. He looked like he had not slept in days, and Willa realized he must have been riding almost constantly to have covered that distance. "Please, he's all I have. He's been with me for 8 years. I'll pay anything." Willa made a decision in that moment, one that would change everything, though she did not know it yet. "I'll help your horse," she said, "but I cannot promise anything." The cowboy stared at her. "You're a veterinarian." "No," Willa said. "But I grew up on a horse ranch in Kentucky before coming out here 3 years ago. My father bred thoroughbreds, and I learned from him and from experience. I have probably seen more sick horses than most people in this town." It took 6 men to carefully drag the gelding into the livery stable on a piece of canvas. Willa directed them to the largest box stall, one with good ventilation, and once the horse was settled on a thick bed of clean straw, she sent everyone away except the cowboy. "What's your name?" she asked as she examined the horse more carefully, running her hands along his legs, checking his hooves, listening to his breathing. "Tucker Vance," he said. "And this is Copper." "Well, Tucker Vance, your Copper has been ridden nearly to death, but he has a strong heart. That might be enough." She looked up at him. "I need you to trust me and do exactly what I tell you." "Anything," Tucker said immediately. Over the next hour, Willa worked with an efficiency born of experience. She had Tucker help her cool the horse down slowly, using damp cloths to wipe him down carefully, avoiding shock to the system. She mixed a mash of bran and molasses with herbs she kept in her room at the boarding house, substances her father had taught her could help settle a distressed gut and provide gentle nutrition. She monitored Copper's breathing constantly, watching for any sign that his lungs might be failing. Tucker followed every instruction without question, his hands gentle despite their size, his voice soft as he murmured encouragement to his horse. Willa found herself watching him when she thought he would not notice, seeing the genuine love he had for this animal, the way his whole body seemed to radiate anxiety and hope in equal measure. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the stable doors, Copper's breathing had steadied somewhat. He was not out of danger, not by a long measure, but the immediate crisis had passed. Willa sat back against the stall wall, suddenly aware of how tired she was, how her dress was ruined with dirt and horse sweat, how her hair had come completely loose from its pins. Tucker sat across from her, one hand still resting on Copper's shoulder. "Thank you," he said quietly. Most people would have walked away. "Most people do not understand horses," Willa replied. "They see them as transportation, as tools, but they are living creatures with hearts and souls, and they give us everything they have, even when it costs them dearly." "You sound like someone who has loved horses," Tucker said. "I do love them," Willa admitted. "More than people sometimes. They are honest in a way people rarely are." Tucker was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the dimming light. "Will he make it through the night?" "I do not know," Willa said honestly, "but we will take it hour by hour. You should go find your brother, let him know you are here." "I cannot leave Copper," Tucker said immediately. "Your brother is sick," Willa reminded him. "That is why you rode so hard." Tucker's face twisted with conflict. "I know, but Copper, he saved my life more than once. I cannot abandon him now." "Then I will stay with him," Willa offered. "I was planning to anyway. You go to your brother and come back when you can. If anything changes, I will send word." "Where is he?" "The boarding house on 3rd Street, Tucker said. "Mrs. Hammond's place. That is where the telegram said he was staying." Willa nodded. "I know it. Go. I promise I will take care of Copper as if he were my own." Tucker hesitated, clearly torn, but finally nodded. "I will be back before midnight," he said. He stood, then paused. "I did not get your name." "Willa Rose," she said. "Willa Rose," he repeated, and something about the way he said it, soft and careful, made her heart do a strange little flutter in her chest. "Thank you, truly." After he left, Willa settled in for a long night. She had done this before, sat vigil with sick animals, measuring time by breaths and heartbeats. The livery stable owner, Mr. Chen, brought her a lantern and a blanket without being asked, and she thanked him with a tired smile. Every 15 minutes, she checked Copper's vital signs. His temperature was still elevated, but no longer dangerously so. His pulse remained fast but steady. She gave him small amounts of water, watching carefully to make sure he could swallow properly. Between checks, she talked to him in a low, soothing voice, telling him stories about the horses she had known as a child, about her favorite mare who had lived to be 32 years old. Tucker returned just before midnight, as promised. He looked slightly more presentable, having clearly washed and changed his shirt, though exhaustion still lined his face. "How is he?" Tucker asked, coming to kneel beside her. "Holding steady," Willa reported. "No worse, maybe a little better. How is your brother?" Tucker's expression softened. "Awake and coherent, thank God. He had pneumonia, bad enough that the doctor thought he might not make it, but the fever broke this morning. He is weak but improving." "I am glad," Willa said sincerely. "He told me I was a fool for riding a horse that hard," Tucker said with a rueful smile. "Said he would rather die than have me kill a good horse on his account." "He sounds like a man with sense," Willa said, "but I understand why you did what you did. Family is worth everything." "You have family here?" Tucker asked. Willa shook her head. "Not anymore. My parents died 5 years ago, cholera outbreak. I had an aunt here in Las Animas, which is why I came west, but she passed last year. Now I work at the boarding house, the one on 5th Street, cleaning rooms and doing laundry." "I am sorry," Tucker said, "about your parents and your aunt." "Thank you," Willa said simply. She had long since made peace with her losses, or as much peace as anyone could make with such things. They fell into a comfortable silence, both watching Copper breathe. The horse's eyes were closed now, and though he was not truly sleeping, he seemed more restful than he had been. "You should go get some rest," Tucker said after a while. "You have been here for hours. I can watch him now." "I am staying through the night," Willa said firmly. You are welcome to stay too, but I am not leaving until I am sure he is stable. Then, I am staying too, Tucker said, and there was no arguing with the determination in his voice. They talked through the long hours of the night, their voices low so as not to disturb Copper or the other horses in the stable. Willa learned that Tucker was 24 years old, that he worked on a ranch outside of Sterling, that his brother James was 2 years younger and had come to Las Animas looking for work before he got sick. Tucker told her about growing up in Missouri, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the first time he saw the mountains of Colorado and knew he wanted to stay out west forever. In turn, Willa told him about Kentucky, about the rolling green hills and the horse farm that had been her whole world until disease took her parents and creditors took the land. She told him about the journey west, about her aunt who had been kind but stern, about learning to make her way in a world that offered few opportunities for unmarried women without family money. You could start your own practice, Tucker suggested, as a horse doctor. You clearly have the knowledge and skill. Willa laughed softly. In case you had not noticed, I am a woman. Most people would not trust me with their animals, not when there are men they could hire instead. Their loss, Tucker said. You have done more for Copper in one evening than any veterinarian I have ever met. You are kind to say so, Willa said, feeling warmth creep into her cheeks. As dawn began to lighten the sky outside the stable, Copper lifted his head for the first time and nickered softly. Both Willa and Tucker scrambled to their feet, and Willa felt her heart leap with hope as the horse looked at them with clear, alert eyes. Hey there, boy, Tucker said, his voice thick with emotion. You decided to stick around after all. Willa checked Copper's vital signs again and felt relief wash through her. His temperature was nearly normal, his pulse strong and steady. When she offered him water, he drank readily, and though he was still weak, the terrible distress from yesterday was gone. He is going to make it, she said, turning to Tucker with a smile. Tucker's face transformed with joy and relief. Before Willa quite knew what was happening, he had swept her into a hug, lifting her clear off her feet. You saved him, he said. God, Willa, you saved him. Willa felt breathless, and not just from being squeezed. She was acutely aware of Tucker's strength, of the solid warmth of his body, of how good it felt to be held. When he set her down, she had to take a step back, needing distance to clear her suddenly muddled thoughts. I am glad I could help, she managed to say. Tucker seemed to realize what he had done and looked slightly embarrassed. I am sorry, I should not have just grabbed you like that, I was not thinking. It is all right, Willa assured him. I understand, you were relieved. They stood there for a moment, suddenly awkward with each other, the easy companionship of the night giving way to something more complicated as daylight spilled across the stable floor. I should go, Willa said finally. I need to get back to the boarding house. Mrs. Fletcher will wonder where I am and I have work to do. Of course, Tucker said. Will you come back later to check on Copper? This afternoon, Willa promised. Make sure he drinks regularly but not too much at once. Small amounts of the mash every few hours. No grain yet, nothing rich. And keep him quiet. He needs at least a week of rest before he should even walk much, and a month before anyone should think of riding him. I will do exactly as you say, Tucker said. And Willa, I will pay you for your time and expertise. I know you must have lost wages staying here all night. Willa wanted to refuse, but the practical part of her knew she could not afford to. Every dollar mattered when you were saving to maybe, someday, have something of your own. That is kind of you, she said. She left the stable as the town was waking up, the summer morning already warm with the promise of another hot day. Her dress was a disaster, and she knew she must look like she had been sleeping in a barn, which was essentially true. But she felt more energized than she had in months, more alive. And she knew it was not just from saving Copper's life. Mrs. Fletcher was surprisingly understanding when Willa explained where she had been, perhaps because the older woman had a soft spot for animals herself. She let Willa wash up and change, then gave her a lighter workload for the day, seeing how tired she was. But Willa found she could not rest, even when she tried to nap in the afternoon heat. Her mind kept returning to the stable, to Copper, to Tucker with his blue eyes and gentle hands, and the way he had looked at her in the lamplight as they talked through the night. She returned to the livery stable at 3 o'clock, carrying a basket with supplies, herbs and tonics that might help speed Copper's recovery. Tucker was there, as she had somehow known he would be, sitting on an overturned bucket next to Copper's stall. "How is he?" she asked. Tucker's face lit up when he saw her. "Better, I think. He ate some of the mash and drank well. He even stood up for a while." Willa entered the stall and examined Copper thoroughly. The gelding was indeed much improved, though still clearly weak. She mixed a fresh batch of mash, this one with additional nutrients, and was pleased when Copper ate it eagerly. "He is doing wonderfully," she told Tucker. "Much better than I dared hope." "Thanks to you," Tucker said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out several bills. "For your time and knowledge." Willa looked at the money and felt her eyes widen. It was far more than she would have asked for, more than she made in 2 weeks of work at the boarding house. "This is too much," she protested. "It is not nearly enough," Tucker said firmly. "You saved Copper's life. That is worth far more than money to me. Please take it." Willa took the bills, folding them carefully and tucking them into her pocket. "Thank you," she said quietly. Over the next week, Willa visited Copper twice a day, morning and evening. She adjusted his diet as he grew stronger, eventually introducing small amounts of grain mixed with chopped hay. She checked him for any signs of complications, watched his weight and energy levels, advised Tucker on exercise and care. And every visit, she and Tucker talked. They fell into it so naturally, as if they had been friends for years rather than days. Tucker told her about the ranch where he worked, about the endless sky and the hard, satisfying work of cowboying. Willa told him about her dreams, the ones she barely admitted to herself, of somehow saving enough money to buy a small piece of land, maybe breed a few horses, live on her own terms. "You should do it," Tucker said. "You have the knowledge and the skill. All you need is the opportunity." "Opportunity does not often come to women like me," Willa said, but she felt a small flame of hope kindle in her chest nonetheless. On the 8th day after Copper's collapse, Willa arrived at the stable to find Tucker looking troubled. Copper was doing well, nearly back to his full health, but something was clearly bothering his owner. "What is wrong?" Willa asked. Tucker sighed. "I need to get back to Sterling," he said. "I have already been gone longer than I told my boss I would be, and James is well enough to travel now. But Copper still needs another few weeks before he should make that journey, even taking it slow." "So leave him here," Willa suggested. "I will continue to care for him until he is fully recovered, then you can come back for him, or we can arrange to have him brought to Sterling." "Would you really do that?" Tucker asked. "Of course," Willa said. "I have grown quite fond of this horse, and besides, you are paying me more than enough to make it worthwhile." Tucker shook his head. "It is not about the money, though I will certainly pay you for the continued care. It is just you barely know me." "Why would you do this?" Willa met his eyes. "Because I know you love this horse, and I know Copper is lucky to have an owner who cares for him so much. That is enough." Tucker was quiet for a long moment. "Can I write to you?" he asked finally. "To check on Copper's progress." "I would like that," Willa said, and realized she meant it more than she had meant anything in a long time. Tucker left 2 days later with his brother. Before he went, He came to the stable one last time to say goodbye to Copper. Willa gave them privacy, but she could hear Tucker's voice, low and affectionate, telling the horse to be good, to get strong, promising he would see him soon. When Tucker emerged from the stall, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Take care of him," he said to Willa. "I will," she promised. "And Tucker, be safe traveling home." Tucker reached out and took her hand, holding it gently. "Thank you, Willa, for everything. You did not just save Copper, I think maybe you saved me too." Willa felt her breath catch. "Maybe I saved you too," she echoed softly. Then Tucker was gone, and Willa stood in the stable feeling strangely bereft, as if something important had walked out of her life. But she had Copper to care for, and that helped. She threw herself into the horse's recovery, taking satisfaction in watching him grow stronger each day, until by the end of the 3rd week, he was nearly back to his full health and spirits. Tucker's first letter arrived exactly 2 weeks after he left. It was written on rough paper in a surprisingly neat hand, and Willa found herself smiling as she read it. He told her about the journey home, about how James was recovering well, about work on the ranch. But mostly he asked about Copper, wanting to know every detail of the horse's progress. Willa wrote back the same day, sitting at the small desk in her room at the boarding house, telling him everything about Copper's care and recovery. But she also found herself sharing other things, small details about her days, thoughts and observations that she would not normally share with anyone. The correspondence continued, letters crossing back and forth between Las Animas and Sterling. Copper grew stronger until he was fully recovered, back to the healthy, spirited animal he had been before that desperate ride. But Willa kept him at the livery stable, not quite ready to send him away, telling herself it was just to be absolutely certain he was ready for the journey. The truth, which she barely admitted to herself, was that keeping Copper meant staying connected to Tucker. Every time she cared for the horse, she thought of his owner. Every letter that arrived felt like a small gift, something to treasure and read over multiple times. 2 months after Tucker had left Las Animas, a letter arrived that made Willa's heart race. Tucker wrote that he was coming to collect Copper, that he had arranged time away from the ranch, and that he should arrive within the week. Willa read the letter 3 times, trying to understand the mix of excitement and nervousness that swirled through her chest. She told herself sternly that she was being foolish. Tucker was coming for his horse, nothing more. The fact that they had exchanged friendly letters did not mean anything beyond that friendship. She needed to keep her expectations reasonable and her heart guarded. But when Tucker arrived in Las Animas on a warm September afternoon, and Willa saw him riding down Main Street on a borrowed horse, her heart did not listen to any of her stern internal lectures. It leaped at the sight of him, and she felt a smile break across her face that she could not have controlled if she tried. Tucker dismounted and walked toward where she stood outside the general store, and Willa noticed details she had not let herself fully acknowledge before. The way he moved with unconscious grace, the breadth of his shoulders, the way his eyes seemed to light up when he saw her. "Willa," he said, removing his hat, "it is good to see you. And you," Willa managed, suddenly feeling shy. "Copper is at the stable waiting for you." "He is completely recovered." "I know," Tucker said. "Your letters were very thorough, but I was not thinking about Copper just now." Willa's breath caught. "No, no," Tucker confirmed. He took a step closer. "I was thinking that I have missed you. Your letters were wonderful, but they are not the same as talking to you in person, seeing your face, hearing your voice." "I missed you too," Willa admitted quietly. They stood there on the boardwalk, people passing by, the everyday business of the town flowing around them, but Willa felt as if they were in their own small bubble, the world reduced to just the two of them and the sudden, charged air between them. Will you have dinner with me tonight? Tucker asked. At the hotel restaurant. I want to thank you properly for everything you have done. I would like that, Willa said. That evening, Willa wore her best dress, a deep green cotton that her aunt had helped her make 2 years ago. She pinned her hair up carefully, allowing a few loose curls to frame her face, and she had to laugh at herself for acting like a girl going to her first dance, rather than a practical woman of 22 going to a simple dinner. Tucker met her in the hotel lobby, and he had also clearly made an effort, wearing a clean white shirt and dark trousers, his hair still damp from washing. He offered his arm, and Willa took it, feeling the solid strength of him even through the layers of fabric. The hotel restaurant was the nicest place to eat in Las Animas, with white tablecloths and real silverware and food that actually aspired to be more than merely filling. Tucker ordered steak for both of them, with potatoes and vegetables and real coffee, and Willa could not remember the last time she had eaten anywhere that was not the boarding house dining room or her own small room. Tell me truly, Tucker said once they had their food. How was Copper? I know your letters said he was fine, but I want to know everything. Willa smiled and told him, going through the details of Copper's recovery. The setback they had had in the 3rd week when the horse seemed to develop a slight cough that fortunately turned out to be nothing serious. The day he had finally seemed completely himself again. You truly have a gift, Tucker said. The way you understand horses, the way you can help them, it is remarkable. My father would be pleased to know his teaching was not wasted, Willa said. What would you do if you could do anything? Tucker asked. If money and society's expectations were not an issue, what would your life look like? It was a question no one had ever asked her before, and Willa found herself really thinking about it. I would have land, she said slowly. Not a huge ranch, nothing grand, but enough for a small house, a barn, some pastures. I would breed horses, good horses, the kind people could depend on. I would train them properly, treat them well. And I would help other people's horses when they were sick or injured. That sounds like a good life, Tucker said. An impossible one, Willa said, trying to keep the bitterness from her voice. But it is nice to dream. Tucker was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes thoughtful as he looked at her across the table. What if it was not impossible, he asked. What if you could have that life? Unless I suddenly inherit a fortune or find gold in the street, I do not see how, Willa said with a rueful smile. What if you had a partner? Tucker asked. His voice was casual, but Willa saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand tightened slightly on his fork. What do you mean? She asked, her heart suddenly beating faster. Tucker set down his fork and leaned forward. I have been thinking these past 2 months. Actually, I have been thinking about little else. About you, about Copper, about that night in the stable when we sat up together and I felt like I could talk to you about anything. Tucker, Willa said softly. Let me finish, he said. Please. I know we have only known each other a short time. I know this might seem sudden or crazy. But I have never met anyone like you, Willa. You are strong and capable and kind. You see things, understand things in a way most people do not. And I think you might feel at least a little bit the way I feel. How do you feel? Willa asked, barely breathing. Like I found something I did not know I was looking for, Tucker said simply. Like when I am with you, or even just reading your letters, the world makes more sense. Like maybe all the hard miles and difficult days led me to exactly where I was supposed to be. Willa felt tears prick her eyes. I feel that too, she whispered. I tried not to, tried to be sensible, but I feel it anyway. Tucker reached across the table and took her hand. I have some money saved, he said. Not a fortune, but enough. And I have been working for the ranch in Sterling for 6 years now. They would give me good references. We could pool our resources, find a piece of land, start small, You could have your horse farm and I could work it with you. We would be partners in every way. Tucker, are you asking me to go into business with you? Willa asked, wanting to be absolutely clear about what he was proposing. No, Tucker said. I mean yes, but not just that. Willa Rose, I am asking you to marry me, to build a life with me, to be my wife and my partner and the person I wake up to every morning. Willa stared at him, her mind reeling. This was sudden, impulsive, possibly crazy. They had known each other for less than 3 months, had spent only a week in actual physical proximity. There were 1,000 practical reasons to say no, to be cautious, to slow down. But Willa had been practical her whole life. Practical had gotten her parents buried, her home sold, her life reduced to washing other people's linens and living in a rented room. And in that moment, with Tucker's hand warm around hers and his blue eyes full of hope and earnestness, she decided that maybe practical was overrated. Yes, she said. Yes, Tucker Vance, I will marry you. Tucker's face split into a grin so wide and joyful it made him look years younger. He stood up, came around the table and pulled Willa to her feet. Then, right there in the hotel restaurant with half the town watching, he kissed her. It was Willa's first kiss, and she had always wondered what it would be like, if it would be awkward or disappointing. But kissing Tucker felt like the most natural thing in the world, like something she had been waiting for without knowing it. His lips were warm and firm against hers, and when his arms came around her waist, holding her close, she felt safe and cherished and wanted in a way she never had before. When they finally broke apart, there was a smattering of applause from the other diners, and Willa felt herself blushing furiously. But Tucker just laughed, keeping one arm around her waist, and she found herself laughing too, giddy with happiness and the sudden, shocking reality of her changed future. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Las Animas, with Tucker's brother James standing up as best man and Mrs. Fletcher from the boarding house serving as witness. Willa wore a simple dress of cream-colored muslin that Mrs. Fletcher had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers that Tucker had picked that morning. It was not a grand wedding, nothing like the society affairs she had occasionally seen back in Kentucky. But as Willa stood beside Tucker and spoke her vows, promising to love and honor him for the rest of her days, she felt like the luckiest woman alive. After the wedding, there was a small celebration at the hotel, with cake and lemonade and well wishes from the handful of people they had invited. Then Tucker and Willa spent their wedding night in the hotel's best room, which Tucker had reserved weeks in advance. Willa was nervous, knowing what was expected on a wedding night, but having only the vaguest understanding of the practicalities. But Tucker was patient and gentle, taking his time, making sure she felt comfortable and cherished. And when they finally came together as husband and wife, Willa felt a connection that went beyond the physical, a sense of rightness and completion that made tears spring to her eyes. "Are you all right?" Tucker asked immediately, seeing her tears. "More than all right," Willa assured him, pulling him down for another kiss. "I am happy. Impossibly, wonderfully happy." The next few months were a whirlwind of change and activity. Tucker collected copper from the livery stable, and he and Willa began searching for land to buy. They looked at several properties, some too expensive, others in poor locations or with inadequate water access. Finally, in late October, they found it. 50 acres about 5 miles outside of Las Animas, with a small but sturdy house, a barn that needed work but had good bones, and access to a creek that ran year-round. The price was more than they had hoped to spend, but not impossible, and the owner was willing to work out terms. They moved in November, bringing with them copper and a young mare Tucker had bought from his former employer in Sterling, along with a few chickens, 2 pigs, and more hope and determination than material goods. The house was small, just 3 rooms, but it was theirs, and Willa had never loved a place more. That first winter was hard. The house was drafty, and they had not quite gotten enough wood laid in, so they spent many nights huddled together in bed for warmth. Money was tight, every dollar accounted for and stretched as far as it would go. There was so much work to do on the property, repairs and improvements that seemed endless, but Willa had never been happier. She woke each morning beside Tucker, helped him with the endless chores, spent her afternoons working with the horses. Word had begun to spread about her skill with sick and injured animals, and people started bringing her their horses, offering to pay for her services. It was not much at first, just $1 here and there, but it was a start. Tucker proved to be everything she had hoped and more. He worked harder than any man she had ever known, up before dawn and rarely stopping until after dark. But he was also unfailingly kind, quick to laugh, and so clearly in love with her that it still sometimes took her breath away. One evening in December, they were sitting by the fire after supper, Willa mending a shirt while Tucker whittled a piece of wood into what was slowly becoming recognizable as a horse. "You ever regret it?" Willa asked suddenly. "Marrying me so quickly, taking on all of this?" Tucker looked up from his whittling, genuine surprise on his face. "Regret it? Willa, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Why would you even ask that?" "Because it has been so hard," Willa said. "The money is tight, the work is endless, and we are barely scraping by. You could have had an easier life if you had just stayed in Sterling, working for someone else." Tucker set down his knife and wood and moved to sit beside her on the floor. He took the mending from her hands and laced his fingers through hers. "I do not want an easy life," he said. "I want this life, with you, building something that is ours. Yes, it is hard. Yes, there are days when I am so tired I can barely stand. But at the end of every one of those days, I get to come inside to you. I get to lie down beside you. I get to wake up and do it all again, knowing we are doing it together. That is not something to regret. That is something to treasure." Willa felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were good tears. "I love you," she said. "I do not think I say it enough, but I do, so very much." "I love you too," Tucker said, pulling her close. "More than I have words for." They sat there by the fire, wrapped in each other's arms, and Willa felt a peace settle over her that she had not known since before her parents died. She was home, truly home, in a way that had nothing to do with a place and everything to do with the man beside her. As winter gave way to spring, their little ranch began to truly take shape. Tucker repaired the barn and built 2 additional stalls. Willa started a vegetable garden and planted an apple tree beside the house. The mare they had bought, a sweet-tempered sorrel named Daisy, turned out to be in foal, and in April she delivered a healthy colt that looked like he would grow into a fine horse. Willa's reputation as someone skilled with horses continued to grow. By summer, she was getting regular work, enough that she could actually charge reasonable fees rather than just accepting whatever people could pay. One rancher, impressed with how she had cured his prize stallion of colic, sent 3 other people to her. A farmer whose draft horse had gone lame said she was better than any veterinarian he had ever dealt with. Tucker supported her work completely, proud of her skills and happy to take on more of the ranch chores, so she could focus on the horses people brought her. They made a good team, falling into rhythms and patterns that worked for them, learning each other's strengths and covering each other's weaknesses. In August, Willa realized she had not had her monthly courses in nearly 3 months. She said nothing at first, not wanting to raise hopes only to be disappointed, but as more weeks passed and other signs appeared, she could no longer deny what was happening. she told Tucker one evening as they walked out to check on the horses before bed. The summer air was warm and sweet, full of the smell of grass and horses and the wildflowers that grew along the creek. "Tucker," she said, taking his hand, "I have something to tell you." He looked at her, and she saw worry flash across his face. "What is wrong? Are you ill?" "No," Willa said quickly. "Nothing is wrong. In fact, something is very right. Tucker, I am going to have a baby." Tucker stopped walking. He stared at her, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and finally pure joy. "A baby, truly, truly," Willa confirmed, smiling. Tucker let out a whoop of happiness that startled the horses in the nearby pasture. Then he was lifting Willa up and spinning her around, both of them laughing, and Willa felt her heart so full she thought it might burst. The baby, a boy they named Thomas after Tucker's father, was born the following March on a day when spring seemed to arrive all at once after a long, cold winter. The birth was hard, longer and more painful than Willa had been prepared for. But when the midwife finally placed her son in her arms, Willa looked into his tiny, perfect face and felt a love so fierce it almost frightened her. Tucker cried when he held his son for the first time, tears streaming openly down his face as he cradled the tiny bundle with infinite care. "He is perfect," Tucker whispered. "Willa, look at what we made." "I know," Willa said, exhausted but happier than she had ever been. "I know." Thomas was a good baby, healthy and growing well, though he demanded much of Willa's time and energy. Tucker took on even more of the ranch work, often caring for Thomas as well when Willa had horses to treat. He proved to be a devoted father, patient with the baby's crying, quick to change diapers or walk the floor during fussy evenings. One afternoon, when Thomas was about 6 months old, a man rode up to their property leading a horse that was clearly in distress. Willa recognized him as one of the wealthier ranchers from the area, a man named Mr. Sullivan who owned thousands of acres to the south. "Mrs. Vance," he said, dismounting, "I heard you are good with horses. I hope you can help mine. He stepped in a hole 3 days ago, and I am afraid his leg is broken. My men are telling me to shoot him, but he is a good horse, and I do not want to lose him if there is any way to save him." Willa examined the horse, a handsome chestnut gelding with an obvious fracture below the knee. It was serious, the kind of injury that most people would not even try to treat in a horse. But as she ran her hands carefully over the leg, Willa thought there might be a chance. "I can try," she told Mr. Sullivan, "but I cannot promise anything. It will be difficult, and he will need months of careful care." "Do whatever you can," Mr. Sullivan said. "Money is no object." Over the next weeks, Willa worked with that chestnut gelding more intensively than she had worked with any horse since Copper. She set the leg as best she could, splinted it carefully, and devised a sling system to help support the horse's weight and keep him from putting too much pressure on the healing bone. She dosed him with herbs to manage pain and prevent infection, and she spent hours each day monitoring his condition and adjusting his care. Tucker helped her, of course, as he always did. And gradually, impossibly, the horse began to heal. The fracture knit, the swelling went down, and eventually the gelding was able to bear weight on the leg again. When Willa finally told Mr. Sullivan that his horse would make a full recovery, the rancher looked at her with something like awe. "You have done what 3 veterinarians told me was impossible," he said. "Mrs. Vance, I would like to offer you a business proposition." The proposition was this: Mr. Sullivan would help fund the construction of a proper veterinary facility on the Vance property, with stalls specifically designed for treating sick and injured horses, and proper storage for medicines and equipment. In exchange, Willa would agree to provide veterinary services to his ranch at a reduced rate for the next 5 years. It was an opportunity beyond anything Willa had dreamed possible. She and Tucker talked late into the night, weighing the pros and cons, but really the answer was never in doubt. They accepted Mr. Sullivan's offer. By the time Thomas was walking, tottering around on chubby legs, Willa had a small but proper veterinary barn, and she was treating horses regularly. She was still one of the only women working as a horse doctor in Colorado, but her reputation had grown to the point where people cared more about her skill than her gender. The years passed in a blur of work and joy, and the everyday rhythms of life. Thomas grew into a bright, curious boy who loved horses as much as his parents did. 2 years after Thomas was born, Willa had another baby, a daughter they named Rose after Willa's mother. Then 3 years after that, a second son, Henry. The ranch grew too, slowly but steadily. They added more horses, improved the house, built a new barn. Tucker proved to have a gift for training horses, taking the colts they bred and turning them into well-mannered, dependable animals that sold for good prices. But through all the changes and growth, the core of their life remained the same. Willa and Tucker, partners in every sense, working side by side to build something lasting. They had their hard times, of course. There was the year of the terrible drought when they nearly lost everything. The winter when Tucker broke his arm and could not work for weeks. The fever that swept through the area and took several neighbors, though mercifully spared the Vance family. But they weathered every storm together, their love deepening with each passing year, until Willa could not imagine life without Tucker any more than she could imagine life without breathing. One evening, nearly 10 years after that day when Copper had collapsed in the middle of Main Street, Willa and Tucker sat on the porch of their house watching the sun set. The children were inside, Thomas reading to his younger siblings before bed. Copper, now an old horse of 18, grazed peacefully in the pasture, retired from work but still a beloved member of the family. "You remember the night we sat up together in the livery stable?" Tucker asked, taking Willa's hand. "I remember everything about that night," Willa said. "I knew then," Tucker said. "Maybe not consciously, but some part of me knew that you were going to change my life, that you were exactly who I had been waiting for without knowing it. When you said I saved Copper, and I said maybe I saved you too, I meant it," Willa said softly. "But Tucker, you saved me just as much. Before I met you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You gave me a life beyond anything I had dared to dream of." "We saved each other then," Tucker said, pulling her close. "And we have been saving each other every day since." Willa leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the last light fade from the sky, and felt a contentment so deep it was like peace made tangible. She thought about that frightened girl who had once knelt beside a dying horse, hoping desperately that she could help, never knowing that horse would lead her to everything she had ever wanted. "I love you," she told Tucker, the words as true and necessary as they had ever been. "I will love you every day for the rest of my life." "And I love you," Tucker replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Thank God for that desperate ride and that hot summer day and Copper collapsing right where you could see him. Thank God for all of it, because it brought me to you." Inside the house, they could hear Thomas's voice rising and falling as he rayed, Rose's occasional questions, Henry's sleepy murmurs. Outside, the horses were settling for the night, and a breeze carried the smell of grass and earth and growing things. The years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to their life together. Thomas, as he grew older, developed his father's skill with horses and his mother's gentle way with animals. By the time he was 16, he was helping significantly with both the training and the veterinary work, showing a particular talent for working with difficult horses. Rose proved to be the family's free spirit, more interested in books and drawing than horses, though she loved them in her own way. She had a gift for making friends and seeing the best in people, and Willa often thought she had inherited her father's open heart and generous nature. Henry, the baby of the family, was the most like Willa in temperament, quiet and observant, content to spend hours watching and learning. He had a particular fascination with the medicinal herbs Willa used, and by the time he was 10, he could identify dozens of plants and knew their uses. The ranch continued to prosper. They never became wealthy in the way Mr. Sullivan was wealthy, but they had enough and more than enough. The horses they bred earned a reputation for soundness and good temperament. Willa's veterinary practice grew to the point where she occasionally had to turn away work, unable to take on more than she already had. But more than the material success, what Willa treasured was the life they had built. She loved the rhythm of their days, the satisfaction of hard work well done, the joy of watching her children grow. Most of all, she loved her partnership with Tucker, the way they had grown together rather than apart, the way they could still make each other laugh, the way their love had matured into something deeper and richer than the passionate whirlwind of their early days. Copper lived to the remarkable age of 22 before he quietly passed away one spring morning in his pasture. Tucker found him and came to get Willa, and they stood together beside the old gelding's body, both of them crying unashamedly. "He was a good horse," Tucker said, his voice thick. "The best I ever had. He brought us together," Willa said, taking Tucker's hand. "He gave us all of this." They buried Copper on a hill overlooking the pastures, planting wildflowers on his grave. For months after, Willa would see Tucker standing by that hill, and she knew he was remembering that desperate ride, that collapse in Main Street, all the ways one horse had changed both their lives. Thomas left home when he was 20, heading to Montana to work on a large horse ranch, wanting to see more of the world before he settled down. Rose married a schoolteacher from Las Animas when she was 19, a kind young man who loved her wild spirit and encouraged her dreams of one day writing books. Henry stayed on the ranch, taking on more and more of the veterinary work as Willa's hands began to ache with arthritis in her mid-40s. Tucker's hair turned silver, then white, but he never really slowed down, still working the ranch even as his body sometimes protested the demands he put on it. Willa's hair remained dark longer but eventually followed suit, and she would catch glimpses of herself and Tucker in mirrors or windows and marvel that they had somehow become these older people, when in her heart she still felt like that 22-year-old girl kneeling beside a sick horse. One summer evening when they were both in their early 50s, sitting on their porch as they had done thousands of times before, Tucker turned to Willa with a thoughtful expression. "You have any regrets?" he asked, "about the life we have lived?" Willa considered the question seriously, as it deserved. She thought about the things she had given up or never had. The chance to travel far beyond Colorado, the possibility of great wealth or fame, the easier life she might have had if she had made different choices. "No," she said finally. "Not a single one. This life, this ranch, our children, it is exactly what I wanted. It is more than I ever hoped for." "Good," Tucker said, relief clear in his voice. "Because I wanted you to know that I feel the same way. If I could go back and live my life over, I would not change a thing. Well, maybe I would not have ridden Copper quite so hard that day," he added with a rueful smile. "But I would still end up in Las Animas, and I would still meet you, and I would still fall in love with you." "I love you too," Willa said, reaching for his hand. "I have loved you for more than 30 years now, and I will love you for however many more we have." They sat there as the sun set. Two people who had started as strangers and become everything to each other, whose lives had been forever changed by a desperate cowboy, a dying horse, and a woman who knew how to help. Thomas eventually came back to Colorado with a wife and a baby daughter, settling on a property adjacent to theirs and starting his own horse ranch. Rose had 4 children who visited often, filling the house with noise and laughter. Henry married a woman from Las Animas who shared his interest in medicinal plants, and together they expanded the veterinary practice, eventually opening a second location in a nearby town. Willa and Tucker became grandparents 9 times over, and they delighted in spoiling their grandchildren in the way grandparents are supposed to do. They taught the ones who were interested about horses, told them stories of the old days, gave them love and attention and wisdom earned through decades of living through it all. Their love remained constant. They had learned each other so thoroughly over the years that they could communicate with just a glance or a touch. They knew each other's moods, quirks, strengths, and weaknesses. They had seen each other at their best and their worst, and they loved each other through all of it. On their 35th wedding anniversary, Tucker surprised Willa with a trip to Kentucky. They took the train east, something they had talked about doing for years, but never quite managed. They stayed in Louisville for a week, and Tucker drove them out to the area where Willa's family farm had been. The land was owned by someone else now, of course, but Willa stood at the fence line looking at the rolling green hills, and she felt a bittersweet mix of emotions. This had been her first home, the place where she learned everything that had made their life in Colorado possible. But it was also the place she had lost, and she was surprised to realize that the loss no longer hurt the way it once had. "Are you all right?" Tucker asked, standing beside her. "I am," Willa said, and it was true. "I was just thinking that I am glad I got to come back and see this place one more time, but I am more glad that I have you to come back to Colorado with me. This place was my past, but you are my present and my future." "That might be the sweetest thing you have ever said to me," Tucker said, pulling her close. They returned to Colorado and the ranch, and Willa felt the rightness of it, the sense of truly coming home. She had been born in Kentucky, but her heart belonged in Colorado, on the land she and Tucker had claimed together. The years continued their inexorable march. Tucker developed a bad cough one winter that scared Willa badly until it finally cleared up with spring. Willa had a fall from a horse that broke her wrist and forced her to finally admit she was getting too old to do some of the more physical aspects of veterinary work. They both slowed down, accepting help from Henry and Thomas more readily, spending more time sitting on the porch and less time working until they dropped. But they were still together, still partners, still in love. And that, Willa thought, was the greatest gift of all. When Willa was 60 years old, Thomas and Henry approached her and Tucker with a proposition. The veterinary practice had grown so much that they wanted to formalize it, turn it into an official business with a real building in town, not just the barn on the ranch. They wanted to call it Rose Veterinary Services, in honor of Willa. Willa was deeply touched, and she and Tucker helped their sons establish the business. At the opening ceremony, half the town turned out, and the mayor gave a speech about how Willa Vance had revolutionized horse care in the area, how she had saved countless animals and helped countless families. Willa stood beside Tucker, holding his hand, and she thought about that terrified girl who had knelt beside Copper in the street all those years ago. She had not known then that she was changing her life forever. She had just been trying to help a suffering animal, using the skills her father had taught her. But that single act of compassion had led to everything else. Her marriage to Tucker, their ranch, their children and grandchildren, her career, this moment of recognition. It had all flowed from that one decision to help a stranger's dying horse. "Are you proud?" Tucker asked her as they drove home that evening. "I am proud of what we built together," Willa said. "The business, the ranch, our family, all of it, but mostly I am just grateful." "For what?" Tucker asked. "For you," Willa said simply. "For the life we have had. For every single day of the past 38 years. As they grew into their 60s and then 70s, Willa and Tucker did slow down significantly. They no longer worked the ranch actively, leaving that to Thomas and Henry and the grandchildren who were old enough to help. But they still lived on the property, in the house they had moved into as newlyweds, and they still spent their evenings on the porch watching the sun set. Tucker's health began to decline when he was 73. Nothing catastrophic, just the slow wearing down that comes with age and a lifetime of hard physical work. He moved more slowly, tired more easily, sometimes forgot things he had always remembered. Willa cared for him with the same devotion she had once given to Copper, adjusting his diet, making sure he took the tonics Henry prepared, encouraging gentle exercise. And Tucker accepted her care with grace and gratitude, never complaining, always appreciating. "Do you remember what you told me all those years ago?" Tucker asked one evening. They were on the porch, as usual, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. "When I said you saved Copper, I said maybe I saved you too," Willa recalled. "You did save me," Tucker said. "Not just by helping Copper, though that was part of it. But you saved me by loving me, by building this life with me. Before I met you, I was just drifting. After I met you, I had purpose. I had a home. I had everything." "You gave me the same thing," Willa said, tears streaming down her face. "I love you so much, Tucker Vance. I always have. I always will." "And I love you, Willa Vance," Tucker said. "More than life itself." Tucker passed away quietly in his sleep 2 weeks before his 75th birthday, with Willa lying beside him, her hand in his. The doctor said his heart had simply stopped, worn out after a long and full life. Willa's grief was profound, a pain that seemed to encompass her entire being. For 52 years, Tucker had been her partner, her love, her other half. Without him, she felt incomplete, as if part of her soul had been torn away. But she had her children and grandchildren, who surrounded her with love and support. And she had her memories, more than half a century of them, each one a precious gift. She remembered their wedding day, the birth of their children, countless everyday moments that had seemed ordinary at the time but now shone with the luster of lost treasure. She also had the ranch, the land they had claimed together, and built into something lasting. Looking out over the pastures, seeing the horses they had bred, the buildings they had constructed, the life they had created, Willa could feel Tucker's presence. He was in every fence post, every blade of grass, every breath of wind. The family held a beautiful service for Tucker, burying him on the hill next to Copper's grave. It seemed fitting that they should rest together, the horse and the man, the two creatures whose meeting had changed so many lives. At the funeral, Thomas gave a eulogy that made everyone cry and laugh. He talked about his father's strength and kindness, his dedication to his family, his love for his wife. "My father's greatest gift," Thomas said, "was showing us all what true partnership looks like. He and my mother built something beautiful together, and they did it through hard work, mutual respect, and love that never wavered." After Tucker died, Willa thought seriously about following him soon after, as sometimes happened with couples who had been together as long as they had. But she found that she still had purpose, still had reasons to stay. Her children and grandchildren needed her. The veterinary practice, though run by Henry now, still bore her name and her legacy, and there were still horses that needed help. So Willa continued, living quietly on the ranch, spending her days reading and visiting with family and occasionally consulting on particularly difficult veterinary cases. She was there when Thomas's oldest grandson married, when Rose's daughter published her first book, when Henry's son graduated from veterinary school in Denver. She lived to see her great-grandchildren born, 10 of them in total, and she delighted in holding those babies and telling them stories about their great-grandfather, about the ranch, about the wild Colorado of her youth. On the evening of her 80th birthday, surrounded by 3 generations of her family, Willa stood to make a speech. Her body was frail now, her hands gnarled with arthritis, her movements slow and careful. But her mind was still sharp and her heart was still full. "Thank you all for coming," she said, looking around at the sea of faces, so many of them bearing traces of Tucker in their features. "I have been blessed beyond measure in my life. I have had work I loved, a family I adore, and a marriage that was everything I could have hoped for. Some of you know the story of how your grandfather and I met, but I want to tell it again because it is important. A cowboy rode into Las Animas on a dying horse, and I helped save that horse. That cowboy thanked me and told me I had saved the horse. I told him maybe I had saved him too. And in a way, we saved each other. That is what love should be. Not one person saving another, not one person sacrificing everything for another, but 2 people building something together, supporting each other, lifting each other up. Your grandfather and I had that kind of love, and it made everything else possible. So that is my wish for all of you. Find someone who sees you, truly sees you, and who you can see in return. Build something together, whether it is a ranch or a business or a family. Take care of each other. And never, ever take a single day for granted, because life is precious and brief and beautiful." There was not a dry eye in the room when she finished, and her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren crowded around her, hugging her, thanking her, telling her they loved her. Willa lived 2 more years after that birthday. 2 years of gradual decline, but also of peace and contentment. She spent her last weeks in the house she and Tucker had shared, cared for by her children, looking out the windows at the land they had loved. On her last day, Rose sat beside her bed reading aloud, and Willa drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes present and sometimes somewhere else. In her mind, she was young again, kneeling beside a bay gelding in the dusty street of Las Animas. She was looking up and seeing a blue-eyed cowboy with his heart breaking as he begged for help. She was falling in love in a livery stable, talking through the night, feeling hope kindle in her chest for the first time in years. She was building a ranch with her husband, raising children, treating horses, living a life so full and rich, it seemed impossible that it had all started with one act of kindness to an animal in need. "I am coming, Tucker," she whispered with her last breath. "I am coming home." When Willa died, peacefully and surrounded by love, her children made sure she was buried on the hill next to Tucker and Copper, the 3 of them together for eternity. The entire town of Las Animas turned out for her funeral, along with people from all over the state who had known her or whose animals she had helped over the years. The Rose Veterinary Services business continued to thrive under Henry's leadership, and eventually under his children's leadership. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through the generations, each one adding to it and improving it while maintaining the core values that Willa and Tucker had established. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun was setting and the wind whispered through the grass, people swore they could see 2 figures walking hand in hand across the pastures. A man and a woman, still together even beyond death, still partners, still in love. The story of Willa and Tucker became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It became a story about compassion and hard work, and the courage to take a chance on love. It became a story about building something lasting, about partnership and dedication, about two people who found each other against all odds and created a legacy that endured long after they were gone. But at its heart, it remained what it had always been: a simple story of a woman who nursed a cowboy's horse back to health, of the cowboy who told her she had saved him, and of her reply that maybe, just maybe, she had saved him too.